Tang Yongjiang was born in China in 1929. In 1937, when he was 8, his hometown came under Japanese attack. His family moved many times for their safety. By the end of the Japanese occupation, they had lost a son and their home.
Our house that we lived in, our family of over a dozen, lived in a very big house. It had 2 courtyards, rooms were spacious. Besides the courtyards, it had a very nice backyard garden. The garden had trees, lawn, and even a small pond. There was even a pavilion in the garden. When we were young, we used to play by the side of the pond catching frogs. We went to school, to the White Army Public School. It was just adjacent to our home. It was just on the other side of the wall from where we lived. And I should say, before I was 8, life was then very good, and we're all very happy. But life is so unpredictable. I was in primary 3. It was in the year 1937, and the month was July. I don't remember the exact date when suddenly we learned from family and from school that Japan had launched a war against China, and the war had broken out at Bugle Bridge. Very soon afterwards, Japanese planes appeared above Baoding. The planes circled above Baoding, doing reconnaissance and sometimes opening fires. Everybody was trembling with fear. So in our home, in order to protect us from the Japanese airstrikes, they turned an underground storage area in a garden into a temporary air shelter. Whenever the siren alarm sounded in the city, the adults would rush us to hide in this temporary air shelter. As days passed, things became more and more worse. There was no way we could live a peaceful life anymore. To escape from the disasters brought on by the war, the whole family decided we should leave Baoding and go to Anhui. The Japanese soldiers were moving south from Marco Polo Bridge and were drawing closer. The family decided that our uncle should lead the family and took us by train to Anhui. Anhui was not yet invaded by the Japanese. We rode the train. In my then 8-year-old mind, I remember sitting on a train hurrying to the south. As our train was near Shijiazhuang, suddenly a Japanese plane caught up with us and circling above the train, flying very low. The train engineer saw this and was very worried, worrying that the plane would fire at us or even worse, would drop bombs. We would all die if it really did. The driver then stopped the train in emergency asking everybody to get off and scatter ourselves in the fields, to hide ourselves in the fields. We hide in the fields and lie low. I remember clearly lying on the ground, seeing a Japanese plane flying very low, and the wings of the plane with the Japanese flag on them. It made very deep impression on me. We dared not to move, not knowing whether it would fire or drop bombs. The plane made several circles and then flew away. I remember very clearly, there was this young bugle boy in the new Fourth Army. He blew the bugle every morning to assemble the troops. He was just a few years older than we were, no more than 5 or 6 years older, probably about 16, 17 or 18 years old, a young fellow. He especially liked us and liked to make friends with us kids. You see, I was then about 8 or 9. My youngest elder brother was 10. My third brother was 12. And my second brother was only 14. My oldest brother died before we fled from hometown. We also liked the Bugle Boy. We were good friends, and we played together. One day, I remember very clearly, it was nighttime. All of a sudden, the sound of guns, machine guns and rifle broke the silence. Tat-tat-tat, tat-tat-tat. The whole family was awakened. I recall my father and uncle woke us up, driving us out of bed, and ordered us to stay away, as far away from windows as possible. Took cover by staying close to the wall and under the window to avoid being hit by any stray bullets coming from outside. We guess it was the new Fourth Army resisting the invading Japanese. Fighting went on, and gradually dawn broke and gunfire stopped. We thought probably the Japanese had withdrawn with the resistance of the new Fourth Army. Gunfire had stopped, so the family was sitting on a bed. Suddenly, there was loud banging at the door. Bang, bang. Adults could have had answered the door, but on second thought, they hesitated, because the new Fourth Army definitely wouldn't be so rude. They said, what if it was the Japanese and an adult opened the door for them? My father was then in his 30s, close to 40 years old. Almost 40 years old. It would be unpredictable what the Japanese could have done to him. It was finally decided it would be better for us kids to open the door. I remember clearly, we children slowly unbolted and opened the door. It scared us to see some Japanese soldiers outside the door. They were in Japanese military uniform and wearing hats. They held rifles with bayonets pointing at the door. When the door opened, they did not dash in. They were also afraid someone would fire at them. When they saw it was only us kids, they waved us aside with the bayonets and went into the house. In the house, they bayoneted all over the places, searching. It turned out that the new Fourth Army had retreated. The Japanese were searching for the new Fourth Army soldiers. They searched everywhere in the house, everywhere. And then they also searched the vicinity. We dare not move. They saw that our father was a civilian and obviously did not look like a new Fourth Army soldier. Having found nothing, they left us to continue with the search elsewhere. We were all very frightened and stayed indoor. Not very long afterwards, we heard there was a lot of noises outside. There were people shouting. It seemed that they were calling everybody to leave home and go outside. When the Japanese saw the civilians had come outside, they pushed the man up the bridge. My memory is that, you see, we were standing here. They pushed the man to the top of the bridge, turned him around to stand facing us. Suddenly, the Japanese soldiers kicked the man from the back, pushed him and forced him onto his knees to kneel down there. I only recall the scene. Of course, I couldn't know what the Japanese soldiers were saying. The Japanese soldier went over, straddled over the Chinese man, violently tore open the man's shirt, bearing his chest and belly. We didn't know what he was trying to do. Then another Japanese soldier with a bayonet came forward and stabbed his belly and his chest. Blood gushed out. It really pains my heart to recall that scene. It really pains me. The man's head drooped. After stabbing a few times, he pulled out the blood bayonet. Then the other Japanese soldiers who was holding the bound hands let go, and the body fell to the ground. We thought it was over. And then 4 Japanese soldiers came up. 2 grabbed the man's legs, and the other 2 grabbed the man's hand. The 4 lifted the body of this dying man, and they lifted up and swung it back and forth, and suddenly they threw it over the railing, and boom, it dropped into the water. Oh, for 60 years, I have not forgotten this terrible scene. I could never forget it as long as I live. Later on, my brothers and I went looking for our friend, the Bugle Boy. We wondered if he had left. We often played at a place pretty close by that bridge. There was a little pavilion there. We used to play around there, so we went there to look for our friend. Oh, when we reached there, we saw a dead body, face up, lying close by the pavilion. We walked closer and saw it was the Bugle Boy. How did he die? There was a big bullet hole in his neck. The hole was not made by bayonet. There were blood stains around it. They had shot him by the throat and killed him. You see, we were friends and close to him. How could we not feel sad to see him dead? There were many beggars in the streets, dressed in rags. Too many of them. there were just too many poor and suffering folks. But in those days, who were able to help? Our family too. We only had coarse buns for ourselves. We would be lucky if we had cornflower buns. Even cornflower was hard to get. The Japanese had intentionally sold to Chinese people so-called mixed flours. Do you know what is mixed flour? Have you heard of it before? It was bits of corn flour mixed with the bits and residues of grinded coins, mixing them all together. It was almost impossible to use this mixed flour to make buns. I will never forget that. No matter how hard you kneaded it, it just fell apart and could not stick together. It was so coarse in our mouth, it hurts when we chewed. I remember one day there was not even mixed flour buns in our home. It was mealtime. Only a few small buns were left. We ran out of food. The adults saw this. They did not eat to save the food for us children. They cut the small buns in halves and gave to us. There was not enough to go around. We were still hungry. Japan invaded China. They said they came to China to build a so-called Greater East Asia co-prosperity sphere. How can you call that co-prosperity? We suffered so much under the Japanese invaders. I recall that, including those in Southeast Asia, as many as 50 million people must have died during the war. How dare they call that co-prosperity? I remember one day, my brother, my fourth brother, his name was Tang Yongjiang. He was 3 years older than me. I was 12 and he was around 15 or 16. Usually we came home for lunch, eat at home. But that day, I cannot remember the exact month. Every one of us came back, except for him. All of us went out to look for him. My uncle, my father, including my grandma. We all went out to look for him, to check whether he has been abducted by the Japanese soldiers. We searched in alley, streets, everywhere and all over the places. We searched everywhere, but we failed to find him. And then our neighbors told us that Japanese soldiers had abducted many people from the neighborhood. We kept on searching. We failed to find him. At last we learned that the Japanese soldiers had abducted these Chinese people and sent them over to northeastern China to serve as forced laborers. We have not heard anything from him since.
Tang Yongjiang eventually worked as a school teacher in China. He came to Canada in 1997 to join his family.
Whenever I see the Japanese flag, it brought to memory of Japanese planes, firing, wings of the planes, images of these Japanese planes, Japanese soldiers holding bayoneted rifles with flags hanging below the bayonets. I just cannot forget these images, not within my lifetime. I know that it's not just China, but other countries that had suffered under the Japanese invasion, such as South Korea, North Korea, and the Philippines. People of these countries are all against the Japanese visiting the Yasukuni Shrine, and they are whitewashing their invasion history. So when I heard that there was going to be a protest march there, I decided to go, despite the fact that I've been suffering from gout. And my legs were in pain. I had trouble walking the stairs. My knees hurt, and I could not walk for long. But I bit my teeth and joined the march. We need to join hands to defend world peace, to ensure that people the world over can live in peace and happiness. We urge Japan to repent its past wrongdoings.